Now, when he told me about the subject of the lecture, I said, okay, fine. But I fully realized that the subject or the topic fitted into Rotimi's political DNA. He fights the good fight, and his DNA is he has a fighting spirit any day, and I think everybody who has come to know him understands that. Therefore, when he told me that he wanted me to talk about poverty and democracy and all that, I said, okay, fine. I'm going to adjust it and just talk about democracy and the poverty republic, because I think we live in a poverty republic, because the number of poor people in Nigeria has in the last 2 years overtaken the rest of the population. So, and we have graduated, we have even overtaken India as the poverty capital of the world. Therefore, I feel comfortable talking about democracy and poverty. Then I had another problem. I asked Rotimi, I said, what makes you think that I qualify to give this lecture? He said, no, I just do it. I said, okay, I will. So, but I reminded him that in today's Nigeria, you need to fulfill certain criteria in order to qualify for people, all these important people here, to be listening to you. In Nigeria, if you want people to listen to you, it's either you are a pastor and a imam, but in addition to those two, you must also have a lot of money to buy that audience. I don't think I'm either a pastor or an imam. In addition to that, if you want Nigeria to listen to you, you must have a lot of money. The hope is that after your lecture, after your talk, you will leave something behind. But unfortunately, again, I don't belong to the class of the wealthy. I have spent all my life working in two of the most underprivileged professions, teaching and journalism. If you want to retire as a poor man, join any of these two. If you also want people to listen to you for their own good, you better be a politician. You know, politicians thrive on audience, and they do get it. On the other hand, you can be a traditional authority. If you're a traditional authority, you get an audience. Unfortunately, I'm not a chief. Don't have a chieftaincy title. There is a more dangerous and creeping category of speakers who get an audience, whether you like it or not. They are in the social media. In the social media, these days, you turn on your phone in the morning, somebody is giving you a lecture. They call them power speakers, they call them private preachers. These are dangerous because they are communicating to you or with you directly, one-on-one, on your phone. You cannot escape. If it was a large audience like this, you can decide to walk away. But if somebody early in the morning wakes you up and talks to you on your phone, you probably have no choice. You have to listen. Having said that, the two subjects that are bound together today in what I want to talk about is democracy and poverty. What is the relationship? Now, whether we like it or not, democracy is a function of choice. the choice of the people about who governs them, who rules them. Who governs or who rules them. While poverty has to do with access to resources, the farther you are away from the source of resources, the poorer you are. The nearer you are to the source of authority and power, the more you are privileged in the democratic terrain. But both of them are linked, because those who seek power through democracy always need the population. And most of the people in the population are poor people. But one thing is clear: the power to decide on who rules over you as a populace is a function of your relative prosperity. A poor society is very poor in making decisions, and in fact they are disenfranchised. Even though you can conscript them to vote for you, but majorly, if there is no empowerment, if there is no prosperity, you cannot have democracy. And if you take the history of democratic transition all over the world, it is the same thing. It is the empowerment, the economic empowerment, the liberation from poverty that produces democracy. If you take Europe, after the Industrial Revolution produced wealth, produced prosperity, produced a middle class of workers. It was this middle class of workers and workers that rose to challenge the kings. This is how Europe made a transition from monarchism to popular republic. In other words, once people were working, they were making money, they realized that they had the power. And why would the king and the queen be ruling over them? So what happened? You had all the popular revolutions. They beheaded the kings, they dragged the queens over the roadside, they overthrew the monarchy and empowered the popular parliament. Instead of kings, they began to have prime ministers and presidents. Where the kings fought a rearguard battle, they say, okay, we can have the ceremonial monarchy, but real authority and government must come from the people themselves. Therefore, the point I'm making here is that economic empowerment, economic power, the conquest of poverty is what enhances the rise of democracy, not the other way around. Now, if you look at Africa, just broadly, because we don't have a lot of time, you will find out that in Africa, it's the other way around. Colonialism bred an elite. The elite decided with the colonialists that democracy is the best form of government. So they set up parliament, built a state house, and promulgated the constitution, and went out to recruit the people to vote, to form parties, and set up democracy. So it's democracy from the top. It wasn't that because people had become rich or become prosperous that they opted for democracy in Africa. As a result of this, out of 54 African countries, only 20 can be described as minimally democratic. what has emerged in the world is that these two concepts, democracy and poverty, or poverty alleviation, have come to dominate. In the world, people are choosing different forms of democracy. You have different versions, a diversity of democracy. We all know the American one and where it has currently led. We know the European one, which arose as a result of the Industrial Revolution. But China also says it is democratic. Although it is one party, 1.4 million people rule under one constitution by one person and belonging to one party, making their choice about who rules them. We can argue from now till tomorrow about whether that's democracy or not. As far as the Chinese are concerned, it is democracy that is working, and that is the concept of appropriate democracy. You have something else that has arisen in recent times. They call it illiberal democracy. It's democracy because people troop out periodically to go and vote. But it is not free. If you are in Russia, Turkey, Hungary, a bit of the Philippines, you also live in a democracy. And in theory, you decide who rules you. But I'm not so sure whether Mr. Putin will respect your right to vote when it's time to vote in Russia, but he might not respect your right not to vote for him. The same thing with Viktor Orban in Hungary. The same thing with the man in Turkey. So that's illiberal democracy. Yes, democracy, you are free to choose your leaders, but you must choose me, not the other man.
Or woman.
Or woman, as the case may be. Now, in the Nigerian instance, the Bureau of Statistics recently, I think it was a year or 1.5 years ago, decided that it was not just enough to define poverty in terms of people who live on $2 a day or less, that it should be liberalized. And they came up with multidimensional poverty. In other words, poverty should be measured in terms of access to education, access to food, access to shelter, access to money, access to power, and so on and so forth. But the result they got has put us in trouble, because when it was $2 a day, the population of poor people in Nigeria was about 85 million people. But with multidimensional poverty, when they put in people who have no access to all the essential things of life, Nigeria's poverty population ballooned to about 130 million out of roughly 200 million. What does that mean? It's frightening. What it means is that the number of poor people in Nigeria has now overwhelmed and overcome the rest of the population. So we are now living squarely in a poor republic. And no matter what economists say, the multidimensional poverty is more scientific, it's more realistic, and its simple logic is that if you are living in a country where the rate of population growth is faster than the GDP growth, then your highway to poverty is assured. and Nigeria fits squarely into that. Now, this thing that they call poverty, people gathered in this assembly may not understand it, they might even wave it off. But some of us who grew up from poor background understand that poverty is not a joke. It doesn't joke about its effects. It afflicts people, it leaves scars, it invades and ravages and dominates and pervades whole segments of the population. It also conquers territory. Poverty conquers territory, because if you check Abuja and Lagos, for instance, you find out that places that were started and established as highbrow estates and neighborhoods have in recent times been overwhelmed and overtaken by slums and ghettos. So poverty conquers territory, but conquers territory in its own peculiar way. But more importantly, it also dehumanizes people, reducing them to virtual animals. A poor man, has a different set of feelings. Now, whether we like it or not, poverty in Nigeria and a good number of other countries now has national security implications. We are seeing a different type of crime. We are seeing the persistence of criminality. We are seeing kidnapping that won't go away, abductions that will not go away, armed robbery that won't go away, banditry that will not go away, no matter how much you provide in your budget. The truth is that these issues will not go away because the fundamental reason why those crimes persist is poverty. A good number of people are poor, and they have found out that the easiest way of fighting their own private poverty is to hire or buy a gun and overwhelm the person who is frightened. So you will live in a frightened republic. I'll give you a practical instance. In the eastern part of the country, annually people go home to touch base with their neighborhood, and when they go home, there are little cousins and nephews and brothers who do not have as much privilege. Depend on them for handouts. So if you live in the town and you are doing well, and you come home and you have 10,000, 5,000, or 50,000 to give to people and share, you are spreading a bit of welfare. But in recent times, those urchins in the village, those people who are unemployed in the villages, they wait for you. You are coming home, all right? Fine, you come home. They arrange and kidnap you. They say, well, let's kidnap him and ask for 20 million because ordinarily he was going to give us only 10,000 naira anyway. So it's better and more profitable to kidnap a wealthy uncle and get 20 million or 10 million instead of waiting to collect 10,000 naira. Simple. So you see the effect of poverty on even social cohesion, and that is why I come from a part of the country where you have so many mansions and palaces. The owners don't come home for 10 years or 15 years, as the case may be. Why? They are afraid. So we live again in a republic that is ruled by fear.
Are we understand?
Yes. So, having said that, I'm just going to speed up what I have to say. Now, poverty has become so pervasive and also become a legacy, because when we were growing up, it used to be that you need to send your children to school so that they can conquer their poverty. But now, whether you send your child to the best schools or not, they're not going to find a job. They probably won't find anything to do. So, poverty now negates poverty. Poverty has become a legacy of so many people. And some parents, some poor parents, go and borrow money in order to educate their children. They find out that having educated these children, they graduate, they cannot find a job. The parents have impoverished themselves in order to train their child. This child will not be capable of attending the burial of the parents. So this is where we are. So what we have done is our democracy is gradually redefining itself into something like a government of the poor by the rich for the rich.
Please repeat that.
The government of the poor by the rich for the rich. Now, having said that, the political industry, politics in Nigeria has emerged as an industry, what we now call political industry. And it is one of the fastest growing industries in our country. It's not manufacturing, it's not trading, it's either politics or criminality. Those are the fastest growing industries in our country, criminality and politics. The political industry is very straightforward. It requires, the entry requirements are very lax, very little regulation. If it says you need school certificate, okay, go and get school certificate. If you can't get school certificate, go and swear to an affidavit. If you cannot swear to an affidavit, go and buy an illicit certificate. You are qualified. You can borrow money. So you will see that we are in the city of Abuja. I know some people who 5 or 6 years ago used to travel to Abuja by night bus. Today, some of them cannot even fly first class by air. What they do is to either buy or hire a private jet, because the rate of prosperity, the return on investment in the political industry is the fastest in any industry that you know, because it defies all logic. And because it is so attractive, people are ready to kill in order to win an election. They can rig to win an election. They do anything to win the election. And so politics has now weaponized. Politics has weaponized our poverty. Our poverty has been weaponized. You know, people, politicians, when it's the election time, don't waste your time. It's either you share money, buy votes, or distribute what they call stomach infrastructure. Stomach infrastructure means giving people bread, giving them little money, giving them something that they can make. In fact, in one of the states, they said, look, if I can just get from the politician enough money to make 1 pot of soup that is good, because throughout the years they find out that there's no food. So now there's the political industry. But something positive has happened in recent times. People now know that the politicians will give you little money and they will win and they go away. For 4 years they won't come back. So people collect stomach infrastructure and refuse to vote for you. If you check the last 2 state governorship elections in Edo and Ondo, we witnessed the lowest voter turnout, in spite of the fact that the voters were outnumbered by security, official security. The voters were outnumbered by the money that was dished out. people collected stomach infrastructure and stayed back in their houses. They refused to go out and go. So Edo State witnessed 22% voter turnout. Ondo had 20%, the lowest since 1999. So we may think that poor people are stupid, and they are getting wiser. In conclusion, let me just read bullet points of my conclusion. There cannot be democracy in Nigeria for as long as there is any child that will not be in school tomorrow because their parents cannot pay. You cannot have a democratic country in which children can't go to school because of school fees. We cannot talk of democracy in Nigeria for as long as there are still children anywhere in the land that have to depend on oil lamplight or the moonlight in order to read for their exams. You can't have democracy having meaning in a country like this, where some school fees, some classrooms have no roof, or children study under the trees. And you don't have democracy where so many Nigerians go to bed without food, and all election results are announced 2 years before the election takes place, and you say you are having democracy. 2 years away the election, but the result is announced today. Or when voters are chased away by thugs from election centers, you can't say you have a democracy. Similarly, you cannot have democracy when the election results are issued for voting centers where nobody voted. People didn't show up there to vote, but you have INEC result sheet verified, signed, stamped, and you say you are doing democracy. You cannot. And if we continue to buy votes as if we are buying tokens in the street bazaar, we cannot claim that we have democracy. Therefore, our citizens who are experiencing extreme poverty, our children who are witnessing or experiencing extreme deprivation, they are not hopeful. No matter what we politicians and intellectuals and media say, hope is not foisted. You don't impose hope. Instead, all these people who are suffering all these deprivations, I would call them midnight children. They are the midnight children. They are condemned to torment us forever and ever after. Thank you very much.